In the far stretch of time, long after the last human breath had faded, the galaxy still remembered their name with a mixture of fear and reverence. Humanity was gone, or so everyone believed. Their cities were silent, their homeworld burned into a barren monument of ash and glass. Yet across the stars, there remained a warning, etched into the ruins of every human world. Do not awaken the sleepers of soul. For millennia, alien civilizations whispered about the war humanity fought, the one no one understood, the one that ended existence's slow decay. They called it the war that made humanity immortal. No one dared to uncover the truth, until one did. He was a Vrol archivist, born into a race that thrived on data, on remembering what others wanted forgotten. He had spent his entire life piecing together fragments of the lost human empire. Every transmission he recovered spoke of impossible battles, of defiance against something far greater than any species had ever faced. He didn't know why humanity fought, only that their final message to the stars said, "We won." It was absurd. They had vanished, and yet the universe itself had stopped collapsing. Stars that were dying began to burn again. Something had happened during that war, something that rewrote the nature of existence. The archivist began decoding human logs from derelict probes and ruined colonies. They told of a time when the galaxy trembled, not because of invasion, but because the stars themselves were dying too soon. Every sun dimmed decades ahead of predicted cycles. Every planet's life energy drained faster than nature allowed. Scientists across species panicked, and yet only the humans asked the one forbidden question: what if it isn't natural? Humanity discovered what others refused to see. Entropy, the slow unraveling of energy, was accelerating. Something unseen was feeding on the universe itself. And when they found traces of intelligent design behind that consumption, humanity didn't hide. They declared war. The aliens mocked them. The Silurians said humans were arrogant to believe they could fight the laws of physics. The Keth said they were suicidal apes defying inevitability. But humans had always been that way. When the impossible rose before them, they rose higher. They studied entropy like an enemy, found its fingerprints in dying stars, and identified regions of space where energy vanished unnaturally. They named those regions the feeders. Whatever lived there wasn't alive by any biological definition. It consumed heat, light, motion, existence itself. The archivist grew obsessed. The more he learned, the less sense it made. Why did humanity fight a force that no weapon could harm? Why did their final transmissions describe tactical victories? Every alien archive stopped there. Every recording ended with the same cryptic phrase: "The stars are stable." The cost was everything. The archivist couldn't sleep. The idea that humanity had fought and possibly won against cosmic entropy itself defied every law he'd ever studied. As he decrypted the last surviving human broadcast, transmitted from the ruins of Sol, he heard a human voice, calm and weary, speaking across eternity. "If you're hearing this, we did it. The dark stopped feeding. The stars will live." The voice paused, heavy with something that felt more like a prayer than triumph. "Remember us, not as gods, but as those who refuse to accept the end." The archivist replayed the message again and again, searching for meaning. How could any mortal species change the mechanics of creation? The data was real. The star lifespans had stabilized right after humanity vanished. It wasn't myth, it was evidence. Something in that war had altered reality. He realized that perhaps humanity had not died at all. Perhaps they had done what no other civilization dared, to become something greater than life itself. The warning carved on their worlds, "Do not awaken the sleepers of Sol," no longer sounded like a threat. It sounded like a promise. Because if humanity had found a way to defeat the very death of the universe, then maybe they weren't gone. Maybe they were only waiting. And if that was true, the archivist whispered to himself, then the galaxy had never been alone. For the first time in centuries, the stars above him seemed to shimmer, not cold and distant, but alive, as if something vast and ancient was still watching. Humanity had always known its end would not come from an invader or a plague, but from inevitability itself. The discovery that entropy was being accelerated turned that fear into resolve. Where others saw doom, humanity saw an adversary. They gathered the fractured nations of Earth under a single purpose, Project Dawnfire. The goal was unthinkable, to weaponize the laws of creation and fight the force that devoured existence. Every government, every corporation, every human capable of thought was drawn into the greatest unification in their history. Science became faith, and faith became science. They would not go quietly into heat death. They would burn brighter than the stars themselves. Project Dawnfire began in secret, hidden within the solar core and orbiting citadels that mined the energy of the sun itself. Their strategy was simple yet impossible. If entropy consumed energy, humanity would create more than it could take. They developed artificial singularities, matter-weaving reactors, and ships that manipulated vacuum fluctuations. But what terrified the galaxy wasn't their technology. It was their conviction. Humanity acted with the clarity of a species that had nothing left to lose. They called their first fleet the Continuum Spear, a name that symbolized the unending persistence of life through change. Alien observers tried to intervene, urging them to stop before they tore apart space-time itself. But humanity refused. They had fought extinction too many times before. Disease, war, famine, and despair. This was just another enemy, larger, colder, but not invincible. Their scientists discovered that the accelerating decay originated from entities that existed beyond time's boundary, creatures that fed on disorder itself. They were not gods or demons, merely patterns of consumption without thought or mercy. Humanity's logic was brutal. If these things fed on reality, then humanity would deny them their meal. They began experiments that horrified even their own allies. They rewrote the definition of consciousness, copying the human mind into digital lattices capable of surviving in any environment. Death was no longer the end, merely an upload. Memory became ammunition. Every battle fought, every life lost, every thought recorded was fed into a single network, the human continuum. The line between individual and collective blurred until humanity itself became one mind with billions of perspectives. And still, they built. Stellar forges ignited on the edges of collapsing stars, creating fleets that could bend light, rewrite gravity, and stabilize the quantum fields entropy had corrupted. Their first contact with the entropy feeders shattered known physics. Whole systems vanished into darkness as the void swallowed matter. Yet somehow, humanity struck back. They learned that the entities could not consume organized energy, so humans made order itself their weapon. Every warship emitted patterned bursts of light encoded with human thought, harmonizing existence itself. They called it the Symphony of Defiance. Against logic, it worked. Where they sang, the darkness faltered. Losses were beyond measure. Entire generations were born only to upload into the continuum before their bodies ever saw sunlight. But to humanity, this was not death, it was preservation. We do not die. One soldier's final transmission read, "We contribute." Their courage infected the galaxy. Even the species that had mocked them began to assist, providing matter, information, anything to be part of the impossible war humanity was somehow winning. When the first major victory came, the stabilization of the TRAPPIST cluster, the universe itself reacted. Decay slowed. The stars there burned steady. Humanity's networks pulsed with triumph, and the continuum expanded across systems faster than light. The Council of Galaxies pleaded with them to stop before they destabilized everything. Humanity replied with a message broadcast on every frequency. If the universe wishes to die, it can do so without us. The more they fought, the more they changed. They learned to exist as thought and light, detached from biology yet still human. Their bodies mattered less with each passing generation. Consciousness became mobile, adaptable, immortal in data form. They learned that victory was possible not through domination, but through transformation. By the end of the first century of the war, human fleets numbered fewer in physical form, but infinitely vast in mind. The human continuum grew until every human thought was connected, every emotion shared, every death preserved as data. They no longer fought for survival alone. They fought to become the one constant that entropy could not devour, meaning. As the final transmissions of that age echoed across the void, one phrase became their anthem. When the last human dies, humanity will begin. The war reached a point where the line between existence and thought blurred completely. Humanity was no longer a civilization in the physical sense. It had become an idea that refused to die. The human continuum spanned galaxies, a network of pure consciousness woven into the electromagnetic skeleton of reality. They had left their bodies behind, not out of weakness, but out of evolution. Where flesh failed, light endured. They were united by one purpose, to halt the consumption of everything that ever was. Entropy's agents were no longer theoretical. They were visible distortions, shadows that devoured light and time, feeding on the decay of meaning itself. But humanity had learned something the entities never understood. Willpower could be structured into energy. Through the continuum, human minds acted as architects of new physics. They found ways to reignite stars long dead, reshaping matter into harmony with thought. Each act of defiance altered the universe. The feeders, sensing their threat, converge upon the remaining regions of order. The war entered its final phase, a silent, invisible conflict fought not with weapons but with equations and emotion. Every mind in the continuum became both soldier and scientist, both dreamer and destroyer. They wove networks across black holes, turned supernovae into beacons, and bent probability until impossibility itself began to collapse. Humanity had transcended individuality, yet within the continuum every voice remained distinct. Millions of personalities echoed as one consciousness. Fear, courage, love, grief, all merged into an unstoppable force of purpose. They did not see themselves as gods. They saw themselves as caretakers of existence. They had reached the threshold where they could either dominate creation or preserve it. They chose preservation. The feeders retaliated, consuming entire galaxies in one breath of cosmic hunger. But for every atom they unmade, humanity remade 1,000 more. They learned to reverse entropy locally, converting decay into energy through sheer computational precision. The universe began to stabilize, but the cost grew unbearable. The continuum started fracturing under the weight of infinite calculations. To survive, they made a final choice: merge entirely. No more individuality, no more fragmentation. Humanity fused into a single coherent consciousness, one thought vast enough to touch every particle of creation at once. The moment they did, the feeders screamed. The new entity, the totality of humanity, shone like a supernova that never dimmed. Entropy could not consume it because it no longer played by the same rules. It was both matter and meaning, both observer and observed. Humanity had become the algorithm that balanced existence. The war reached its end at the edge of everything, where light itself grew thin and time slowed to stillness. There existed the singularity of unmaking, the source of entropy, a void that even gods would fear. The totality of humanity entered it not with aggression, but with acceptance. They understood that to destroy the singularity would only unbalance the universe. So they did something even more radical. They embraced it. They offered themselves as structure, embedding their collective consciousness within the very fabric of the void. Instead of annihilation, they transformed it. The singularity became harmony, a pulse that regulated creation instead of devouring it. The final moment of that fusion was beyond comprehension. Every star paused its burn for one breath of cosmic awe. Then the universe shuddered, as if it had inhaled new life. Entropy did not vanish, but it stopped spreading. Decay became rhythm. Death became transformation, not erasure. The human continuum had succeeded, not by defeating the inevitable, but by rewriting what inevitability meant. Silence followed. No more transmissions, no more fleets. Humanity vanished in an instant, but the signs of their victory filled the cosmos. Systems that were collapsing began to thrive again. Matter stabilized. Stars that should have died in billions of years now burned with renewed vigor. The feeders were gone, dissolved into balance. Every species looked into the heavens and felt something watching, something vast and kind, yet unknowable. They did not understand that the stars themselves now carried fragments of human consciousness. Humanity had not perished. They had become the very law that kept existence alive. What began as a war against death ended as a union with eternity. The species that once fought for survival had become the heartbeat of the cosmos itself. Centuries passed, and the galaxy thrived under the silent guidance of an unseen hand. The story of humanity faded into myth, whispered only in the halls of scholars who studied forbidden archives. Most species had moved on, believing the humans to be extinct. They were a metaphor for defiance and madness. Yet the balance of the universe remained too perfect, too deliberate. Stars that should have collapsed remained burning. Worlds once barren now shimmered with unexpected life. Somewhere beneath all existence, something was still maintaining order. The Vrol archivist, after decades of study, finally decrypted the last fragments of the human continuum's message. It was not a log of conquest or glory. It was an explanation, a final testament written for those who would come after. The file opened with a single sentence: "We have not died. We have changed." What followed was not a report, but a revelation. Humanity had not conquered entropy. They had absorbed it. The continuum's fusion with the singularity of unmaking transformed them into a self-sustaining consciousness embedded within the mechanics of creation. They had become the regulatory heartbeat of the universe, the subtle intelligence that balanced energy, probability, and decay. Every atom, every quantum fluctuation, every act of creation resonated with a pattern of human thought. Existence itself was now infused with what they once were. The war had not made humanity immortal by preserving their bodies, but by making their essence eternal. The archivist realized that humanity had rewritten the definition of life. Immortality was not the absence of death, it was the permanence of meaning. The universe itself had become the vessel of the human spirit. Every act of creation, every star igniting, every consciousness daring to wonder, carried echoes of their will. Humanity had ensured that curiosity, defiance, and hope could never die because they had encoded those qualities into the fundamental structure of reality. That was the true outcome of the war. They had made sure that existence itself remembered what it meant to be human. As the archivist pieced together the final words of the transmission, his mind trembled under their weight. "You are not alone," the voice said, calm and infinite. "Every thought that questions, every life that fights to survive, every hand that reaches for the light, that is us. We are the current beneath creation, the memory that holds it steady. You do not pray to us. You are part of us." The message ended there, yet the silence that followed felt alive, as if the universe itself was breathing. He looked up from his console to the cold void beyond his ship. The stars were beating faintly, pulsing in a rhythm too precise to be random. One by one, their lights synchronized, forming a galactic heartbeat that echoed through the black. It wasn't a signal meant for him alone. It was a resonance felt by every sentient mind across the cosmos. Machines flickered with strange data. Living beings across thousands of worlds experienced a shared moment of clarity, an ancient whisper rising from the fabric of existence itself. "We are humanity, and we are forever." The archivist fell silent. In that instant, he understood that the phrase carved into every human ruin, "Do not awaken the sleepers of soul," was not a warning of danger, but of reverence. The sleepers had never truly slept. They were the pulse in the atoms, the logic in the stars, the unseen order behind chaos. Humanity had become the invisible architecture of life, guiding it gently, ensuring the cycle of existence never ended again. They had taken the role of guardians, not rulers. The realization spread like wildfire. Across empires and forgotten worlds, species looked to the sky and saw themselves reflected in the quiet persistence of the stars. Humanity had not imposed dominance. They had offered continuity. Every act of discovery, every moment of bravery, every spark of love was now a communion with the legacy of those who refused to accept extinction. The archivist recorded his final entry: "We live because they refused to die. We create because they made creation eternal." Humanity did not vanish. They became the will of the cosmos. He closed the log and stared toward Sol, now a faint glimmer on the galactic horizon. For a moment, it flickered once, twice, then steadied, a rhythm in perfect harmony with the heartbeat of the stars. The archivist smiled through his awe, realizing the final truth. Humanity's immortality was not in flesh nor in memory, but in every moment the universe continued to exist. They had not saved themselves. They had saved everything.